My name is Daniel Foster. I'm 53 years old, and I died in my driveway in Austin, Texas on a Saturday morning while unloading groceries from my car. One moment I was reaching for a bag of produce. The next, my chest felt like someone had wrapped a steel band around it and was tightening it slowly. And then I was on the concrete, looking up at the oak tree in my front yard, wondering why the leaves were getting darker even though the sun was still shining. My wife, Rachel, found me maybe 30 seconds later when she came out to see why I was taking so long, and I could hear her screaming my name from somewhere far away, her voice fading like a radio station losing its signal as I drifted further from the place where sound and sight and all the familiar sensations lived. The last thing I remember thinking, before everything went black, was that I'd never gotten around to fixing the gutter on the garage like I'd promised. And isn't it strange that in what might be your final moment, your brain fixates on something so mundane, so incomplete, so utterly ordinary? I was declared dead for 7 minutes, according to the paramedics who responded. 7 minutes of no pulse and no breathing while they worked on me. 7 minutes that felt like no time at all, and also like a lifetime. 7 minutes that changed how I understand what mercy actually is, and why so many people who need it most can't seem to accept it, even when it's offered freely. If stories like this matter to you, if you've ever wondered why grace is so hard to receive even when we desperately need it, then I need to tell you what I saw during those 7 minutes. Because it wasn't what I expected, and it showed me something about human nature that I'd been blind to my whole life. The transition from being alive to whatever state I entered wasn't dramatic or frightening, just a gradual fading, like falling asleep, except I didn't lose consciousness so much as my consciousness just detached from the body that had always housed it. I could still think, still remember who I was, still felt like myself. But I was no longer anchored to flesh and bone and all the physical sensations that had defined my existence for 53 years. I became aware that I was moving or being moved, though there was no sense of direction or destination, just this feeling of traveling towards something that was pulling me gently forward. The space I moved through wasn't dark exactly, more like the absence of light hadn't been replaced by darkness, but by some third thing that wasn't quite either. Then gradually the space began to brighten, not like a sunrise, but like my eyes were adjusting to something that had been there all along, but I hadn't been able to perceive yet. The light resolved into a presence, or the presence became visible through the light. I'm still not sure how to describe it, but I understood without being told that I was in the presence of Jesus, though he didn't look like any painting or statue I'd seen in churches or religious art. He looked more real than real, if that makes sense. Like everything I'd experienced in my physical life had been a shadow of this solidity, this absolute reality that needed no interpretation or explanation because it simply was. His eyes held something I'd never seen in any human face, a combination of complete knowledge and complete acceptance, like he knew every moment of my life and every thought I'd had, and somehow still looked at me without condemnation. I expected him to speak, to say something profound about why I was there or what was going to happen next, but instead he just looked at me with a question in his expression that I somehow understood without words. The question was simple, but it cut right through every defense I'd ever built. Do you know why you're here? And I realized I didn't. Not really, not in the way he meant. I'd lived what I considered a decent life, worked hard as an accountant for 30 years, provided for my family, paid my taxes, didn't cheat or steal or hurt people intentionally. I'd stopped going to church after my 20s because the whole thing felt performative and hypocritical, all these people pretending to be better than they were. But I believed in being a good person, and I thought I'd done okay at it. Standing there in front of Jesus, though, I understood that he wasn't asking about my resume or my moral scorecard, but about something deeper, something I'd been avoiding looking at for most of my adult life. Before I could formulate an answer, he lifted his hand, and suddenly I was watching my life again, but not as a simple replay, as an experience where I could feel what I'd felt and also feel what others had felt in their interactions with me. I saw myself as a child, quick to anger when things didn't go my way, learning early that if I got loud enough, my parents would usually give in to avoid conflict. I saw myself as a teenager, developing a sharp tongue that I used to cut people down before they could hurt me, building walls around anything vulnerable and calling it strength. I saw myself as a young man, choosing Rachel not because I loved her deeply, but because she was safe and predictable and wouldn't demand more than I was willing to give. I watched myself go through our marriage, maintaining this careful distance, never quite letting her all the way in, never quite trusting that love could be given without strings attached. And running through all of it like a thread was this pattern I'd never noticed when I was living it. This consistent refusal to accept help, to admit weakness, to receive anything from anyone that I hadn't earned or paid for or somehow controlled. When Rachel tried to comfort me after I lost my job in my 30s, I pushed her away and handled it alone. When my father tried to apologize for being absent during my childhood, I told him it was fine, but never actually forgave him, just carried the resentment like a trophy proving I'd survived without him. When friends offered support or generosity or simple kindness, I always found ways to repay them immediately, to never be in anyone's debt, to never owe anything that might make me vulnerable. I saw the exact moment when my daughter Emily tried to tell me she was struggling in college, how she'd come to me looking for understanding, and I'd immediately gone into problem-solving mode, offering solutions instead of empathy, fixing instead of feeling, making it about my competence rather than her pain. I watched her face close off, saw her decide in that moment that I wasn't safe to be vulnerable with, and I felt the loneliness that decision created in her, the way it shaped how she'd approach relationships for years afterward. The shame of seeing that was physical, even though I didn't have a body anymore, a crushing weight that made me want to look away, but I couldn't, because Jesus was showing me something important, something I needed to understand. Then he showed me something else, the part I'd been hiding from myself for decades. I saw all the times I'd been offered mercy, grace, help, love, and I'd rejected it, not because I didn't need it, but because accepting it would have required admitting I needed it, would have meant acknowledging I wasn't as self-sufficient as I pretended to be. I saw every gift I'd refused, every hand I'd pushed away, every moment of connection I'd sabotaged, because connection required vulnerability, and vulnerability felt too dangerous. And I understood with terrible clarity that this pattern wasn't just about pride or stubbornness, but about fear, bone-deep fear that if I accepted mercy, I'd be confirming that I was weak, that if I received grace, I'd be admitting I couldn't do it alone, that if I let anyone really help me, they'd see how much I was struggling and how little I actually had under control. Jesus still hadn't spoken a word, but somehow I understood what he was showing me. The question wasn't whether I deserved mercy, whether I'd been good enough or bad enough, but whether I could receive mercy, whether I'd developed the capacity to accept a gift I couldn't earn or repay or control. And I understood with dawning horror that I hadn't. That I'd spent 53 years building these walls and learning to do everything myself and refusing to be in anyone's debt. And now I was standing in front of the ultimate giver, unable to receive what he was offering because accepting it would require breaking down everything I'd built my identity on. If you feel there's more to understand about why we push away the very things we need most, why grace is so hard to receive even when we're desperate for it, then stay with me, because what Jesus showed me next made me realize this wasn't just my problem, but something I was part of,
a pattern that runs through humanity like a fault line. He expanded my vision, and I could suddenly see not just my life, but countless others, millions of people, all facing the same moment I was facing, all being offered something they desperately needed, but most of them unable to receive it. The reason wasn't what I expected, wasn't about being too sinful or not believing the right things or failing some test, but about something much more fundamental, much more heartbreaking. They'd all, like me, spent their lives learning to reject mercy, practicing self-sufficiency until it became their prison, building identities around not needing anyone until the core of who they were was wrapped in defense mechanisms that wouldn't let love in. I saw people who'd been hurt early and had decided never to be vulnerable again, who'd rather starve than accept help from hands that might hurt them. I saw people who'd built their worth around being strong, capable, independent, who couldn't accept grace without feeling like they were admitting failure. I saw people so invested in being right that forgiveness felt like defeat, so committed to their grievances that letting them go felt like losing part of themselves. And underneath all the different variations, I saw the same core pattern, the same refusal to receive what was being offered freely, because receiving it required admitting need, acknowledging dependence, accepting that they couldn't save themselves no matter how hard they tried. The tragedy wasn't that mercy wasn't available, but that people had made themselves unable to accept it, had spent their whole lives practicing rejection until acceptance became impossible. I watched as some moved toward the light, toward Jesus, toward whatever was being offered, and they moved easily because they'd practiced receiving during their lives, had learned to accept help and admit weakness and let others carry them when they couldn't walk alone. But others reached a certain point and just stopped, unable to move forward, not because they were being blocked, but because everything they'd built their identity on made it impossible to continue. They couldn't accept being saved, because being saved meant admitting they needed saving. Couldn't receive mercy because mercy implied they were in need of it. Couldn't move toward unconditional love because their whole sense of self was built on being conditional, on earning and achieving and proving their worth. And the most heartbreaking part was that they didn't see it as rejection on their part, saw it as being rejected, blamed the giver for the gift they couldn't receive, turned away from the light, angry and bitter that somehow it wasn't being given to them when actually it was being offered constantly and they were the ones refusing it. Jesus showed me that this was the real tragedy, the real separation, the real loss. Not that God was withholding mercy, but that people had made themselves unable to receive it, had practiced independence and self-sufficiency and emotional defensiveness until their souls had become hard shells that nothing could penetrate. Every time they'd refused help, every time they'd pushed away vulnerability, every time they'd chosen pride over connection, they'd been practice for this moment, practice for being unable to receive the one thing that could save them. Then the vision expanded even further, and I saw something about the world I'd left behind, the current moment in history we're living through. I saw billions of people all building the same walls I'd built, all practicing the same patterns of rejection, all learning to see mercy as weakness and vulnerability as danger and needing help as failure. I saw them on their phones and computers curating images of perfect self-sufficiency, hiding their struggles behind filters and carefully managed presentations, never showing the places where they were broken because brokenness didn't fit the narrative of having it all together. I saw them in their relationships, keeping score, maintaining careful equilibrium, never owing anyone anything, never being fully vulnerable because vulnerability meant someone could hurt them. I saw them alone in their homes at night, exhausted from maintaining the image, drowning in needs they couldn't admit to having, surrounded by people but profoundly isolated because real connection required revealing the places where they weren't okay, and they'd forgotten how to do that. I saw children being taught these patterns by parents who'd learned them from their parents, being shown that strength meant not crying, that independence meant not asking for help, that worth came from achievement rather than from simply being. And I saw that each generation was getting more isolated, more defended, more unable to receive mercy because they'd never been shown what it looked like to need help and have it given freely without conditions or judgment. The communication between people had become transactional, hostile, defensive, everyone protecting their territory and proving their rightness and attacking anyone who challenged their carefully constructed self-image. Empathy had become something people performed online rather than practiced in person, and mercy had become a concept they advocated for others but couldn't accept for themselves.
Jesus showed me that this was leading somewhere dark, that a humanity full of people who couldn't accept mercy was a humanity that couldn't survive, because mercy is what holds us together. Grace is what makes community possible. Forgiveness is what allows us to stay connected despite our constant failures to be perfect. Without the capacity to receive these things, people were becoming isolated fortresses, armies of one, dying alone because they'd never learned to let anyone help carry the weight. And the worst part was that most of them didn't see it, didn't realize they were rejecting the very things they needed most, didn't understand that their strength was actually rigidity, their independence was actually isolation, their self-sufficiency was actually slow death by starvation of the soul. Then Jesus asked me another wordless question, and this one hurt even more than the first. Do you want to go back different? Not just back to life, but back changed, willing to tear down the walls and learn to receive, willing to risk being vulnerable and admitting need and accepting help you couldn't earn or repay. I wanted to say yes immediately, but something in his presence made me understand he was asking whether I was really ready to do that, to live differently, to practice receiving instead of defending, to build a life where mercy could actually reach me. The choice was terrifying because it meant dismantling everything I'd built my identity on, meant admitting that everything I'd thought made me strong was actually making me unable to survive in the presence of real love. But I also understood that staying as I was meant staying separated, meant remaining in this place where I could see what was being offered but couldn't reach it, couldn't take it, couldn't let it transform me. So I said yes, or felt yes, or thought yes so clearly that it became real. And in that moment, something broke open in me. Something rigid and defended and careful cracked wide and let light in for the first time in decades. The relief was overwhelming, like I'd been carrying weight I didn't know I was carrying, and someone had finally lifted it off my shoulders. Jesus smiled then, the first time his expression had changed since I'd been there, and it was like watching the sun rise, like seeing joy made visible. "This is mercy," he said, the first words I heard him speak out loud. Not just forgiveness, but this, being willing to be known and loved anyway, being willing to receive what you could never earn, being willing to need help and let it be given freely. This is what most people reject, not because it isn't offered, but because accepting it requires becoming someone they've spent their whole lives refusing to be. I felt myself being pulled back then, the invisible cord that connected me to my body tugging me away from that place of terrible clarity and devastating love. The last thing I saw was Jesus' face, holding not judgment, but something like hopeful sadness,
as if he knew how hard it would be to stay changed once I was back in the world that had shaped me into someone defended. The transition back was abrupt and painful, like being shoved back into clothes that didn't fit anymore, and suddenly I was gasping on the concrete with paramedics over me and Rachel's face above me streaked with tears. My first words when I could speak were, "I'm sorry," which confused everyone because they thought I was apologizing for scaring them, but I was apologizing for 53 years of pushing away help, of refusing mercy, of building walls around anything vulnerable and calling it strength. I've been back for 11 months now, and nothing about my external life has changed dramatically except that I'm alive when I should be dead. But everything about how I move through that life is different in ways that feel uncomfortable and necessary. I practice receiving now, practice asking for help, practice admitting when I'm struggling instead of pretending I have it all together. It's harder than anything I've ever done because every instinct I've developed over 5 decades screams at me to be self-sufficient, to not owe anyone anything, to maintain the image of having it under control. But I make myself do it anyway because I saw what that pattern leads to, saw myself unable to receive the very thing I needed most because I'd practiced rejection until acceptance became impossible. With Rachel, I'm learning to let her see me vulnerable, to admit when I'm scared or sad or confused instead of immediately problem-solving or shutting down. She doesn't know what to do with this new version of me sometimes, this husband who actually cries and asks for comfort and admits he doesn't have all the answers. But something between us is softening, something that had gone rigid over 30 years of careful distance. With Emily, I'm trying to be the father I should have been, to offer empathy instead of solutions, to be present with her pain instead of trying to fix it, to admit my own struggles so she knows it's safe to share hers. She's cautious, testing whether this change is real or temporary, but she's starting to risk being vulnerable with me in ways she hasn't since she was small. The hardest part is watching other people doing what I used to do, seeing them reject help and push away mercy and build walls around anything that might require them to admit need. I want to grab them and tell them what I saw, explain that the walls they think are protecting them are actually imprisoning them, warn them that they're practicing for being unable to receive the very thing they'll need most when it matters.
But I'm learning that you can't tell people this, can't explain it in a way that penetrates the defenses they've spent lifetimes building, can only try to live it differently and hope they notice something changed. My name is Daniel Foster. I'm 53 years old, and I died for 7 minutes in my driveway in Austin, Texas. What I saw during those 7 minutes changed how I understand mercy, how I see the walls we build, how I recognize the patterns we practice that determine whether we can receive what we're offered or whether we'll reject it because accepting it requires admitting we need it. I saw that most people reject mercy, not because it isn't available, but because receiving it means becoming vulnerable, admitting dependence, acknowledging that they can't save themselves no matter how hard they try. I saw that we practice this rejection every day, every time we refuse help, push away vulnerability, choose pride over connection, build our identities around being self-sufficient when actually we're just becoming incapable of receiving grace. I came back different, or trying to be different, fighting every day against patterns that feel safe but are actually walls between me and everything I need to survive. And I wonder sometimes, watching people around me maintaining their careful defenses and performing their strength while drowning in unacknowledged need, whether they'll figure it out before it's too late, before they've practiced rejection so thoroughly that acceptance becomes impossible even when mercy is offered freely. What are you practicing? That's not a rhetorical question. Every day, we're building capacity for either receiving or rejecting, for either vulnerability or defense, for either accepting help or dying alone in our self-sufficiency. And what we practice now is who we'll become later.
whether we'll be able to receive mercy when we need it most, or whether we'll have made ourselves too rigid to let it in. I saw where that leads. I saw what we're becoming. And I came back different, because the alternative was staying separated from the very thing I was made to receive, the love and mercy and grace that require nothing except willingness to admit you need them. Can you receive it? Can you let down your walls and admit your need and accept help you didn't earn? Or have you practiced rejection so long that acceptance feels like failure, that vulnerability feels like weakness, that needing help feels like proving you're not enough? The question sits there whether you acknowledge it or not, and every day you're answering it with small choices about whether to let people in or keep them at arm's length, whether to admit struggle or maintain the image, whether to ask for help or prove you don't need anyone. I saw what those choices add up to. I saw why most people reject mercy even when they desperately need it.
And now, I can't unsee it. Can't forget it. Can't pretend the walls are protection when I know they're actually prison bars. All I can do is try to live different and hope it matters. Hope that choosing vulnerability over defense creates some small ripple that reaches further than I can see. What will you choose? The walls that feel like safety, or the vulnerability that allows mercy to reach you? The question is there. The choice is yours, and time is shorter than you think.